enough. Well, let's debate that now. Live in our central London studio is Tom Burke, an environmentalist and former government advisor on the environment, and John Redwood, the Conservative MP for Wokingham. Very good to talk to you, gentlemen. Let me start with you then, John Redwood. And can I put that point to you? Is this just abnormal weather, an abnormally wet winter, and weather patterns will resume, and therefore we don't really need to do an awful lot more in terms of flood defences?
I don't think our flood defences are up to the job for normal weather, if there is such a thing, and it's clearly very badly strained by this extreme weather which we're currently experiencing. In my constituency, we regularly get some homes flooded. The two main A roads into Reading are quite often closed for flooding in what people would call more normal weather. So I think we do need to spend rather more and sort out more of these problems. I'm very pleased to hear that the Environment Agency now agrees with the locals in Somerset that dredging the river and getting more capacity to take the water away from farms and homes would work there. We now need a similar response from the agency over what more can be done to protect people on the Thames. It's heartbreaking to see those people's homes being ruined like this. No fault of their own. They live in a fairly densely populated part of the country, a successful part of the country, and then they have everything ruined by water that isn't properly conducted away.
So, Tom Burke, for the future, I mean, is it your view that there is much more of this to come? It's going to get much, much wetter in winters, and therefore we need to respond accordingly?
Yes, it is. I think there's no doubt at all that this is exactly what climate scientists and environmentalists have been saying to governments for years would happen if you went on allowing the climate to change. We've done nothing very much enough yet to stop the climate changing, and we're reaping the whirlwind that we've sown by our inaction. So there's a lot more of this to come over the years. Remember, this is not just, these extreme weather events are not just happening in Britain. They're happening all over the world, from Argentina and Australia through Africa and Asia. We're seeing exactly the kind of extreme weather events that we've been saying to government for a very long time is going to happen. So now we need to do two things. We need a short-term response, and that means we're going to have to spend a lot more on adaptation to a changing climate. But much more importantly, we need to stop this problem getting worse by getting much more aggressive in our efforts to tackle climate change.
John Redwood, we need to get much more aggressive. Politicians have to act globally to deal with climate change.
Well, I wish your other communicator this morning well in persuading the Chinese and the Germans to burn less coal, but I think that's not really going to happen. What we've got to do in Britain, a relatively small but relatively prosperous country, is to make sure that we spend our money wisely and adapt to the conditions as they change. Climate is always changing, and we had extreme floods apparently along these lines over 100 years ago and 200 or 300 years ago. So these extreme events do occur from time to time. And now we are a relatively prosperous society, and we've decided to invest an awful lot of money along the side of major rivers. Surely we've got to do something to make sure that they don't get flooded. These are important parts of our economy. Indeed, it's not acceptable to flood anybody's home, and the anti-flood authorities should be doing more to protect people.
But I just want to ask you, in acceptance of climate change as you do there, Mr. Redwood, but is it driven by humankind? Because if it isn't, there's not much we can do about it.
Well, the climate changes for all sorts of reasons. I mean, volcanic activity, the jet stream, water vapour in the atmosphere, cloud formation, the sun's cycles, as well as man-made CO2, which some people think is the only driver of it. What we seem to have to accept now is there isn't this political will in the world to control the man-made CO2, and there are lots of other possible explanations of why the climate might be varying. And so we in Britain are not in a position to take this Olympian view and to tell the world how to behave. We can't tell the Chinese to burn less energy when they're poorer than us and they expect to get closer to our living standards by burning more energy. So we've got to adapt to the circumstances as we find them.
OK, I want to bring Tom Burke back in on that. Well, you heard that in full there from John Redwood. The powerlessness of us in Britain and indeed humanity as a whole, because there are lots of other, according to John Redwood, there are lots of other things driving the climate change. And from the UK's perspective, we only amount to a tiny proportion of the global output of CO2. What can we do
Well, it's very interesting to see John Redwood adding ignorance to his complacency. We've enormous complacency in the response to this crisis, and what he's suggesting is we go on being complacent about the worst crises to come. I regard that as completely immoral as a position for a politician to take. And lots and lots and lots of other countries are doing an enormous amount because they face the same extreme weather events. So to simply casually say, I'm not going to do anything because nobody else is doing anything is irresponsible and ignorant, both together. So, politicians are quite rightly going to take a lot of blame for the exposure they've put Britain's people to with this event. What we really need are politicians who learn the lessons from what's happening and don't try and pretend that everything is all right and normal and we don't have to do anything.
Okay.
I really must object to that very unpleasant
well,
personal
Mr.
attack,
Mr.
which is
Redwood,
quite
thank you
false.
both very
I am
much
very
indeed.
keen that we do a great deal to sort this problem out, and we have to take practical action.
Well, I'm sorry, gentlemen, we do have to cut it off there, but thank you very much indeed for your contribution to that debate. I want to take you